With this session update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. 10 years ago, a bipartisan commission issued a report with the goal of ending poverty by 2020. Noting that little progress has been made toward that goal, a number of DFL lawmakers and faith leaders called a press conference at the Capitol to renew the effort through a package of proposals that seek to move Minnesotans out of poverty. Here's that media event.
Thank you very much for coming. This is the 10th anniversary of the final report of the Minnesota Without Poverty Commission. The commission was one of those entities we didn't even need a paragraph to explain because the title of the commission explained its duties. Minnesota created a commission in 2006, the Legislative Commission on Ending Poverty in Minnesota by the year 2020. Very precise, long timelines so we could accomplish things. Came out of some people in the faith community asking the state to take seriously its moral obligation to care for our neighbors. It was appointed by the legislature and by Governor Pawlenty. There were 10 Democrats, 10 Republicans. There were 10 equal number from both House and Senate. And we put together, I think, a very solid report. Representative Carlos Mariani and myself, John Marty, were the co-chairs of the commission. I think we were proud of the report we did. And that gave us 11 years to move forward and address poverty in Minnesota. We've had 10 years of very little progress. The poverty rates back then in 2008 are about the same as they are now. About 1 in 10 Minnesotans lives in actual poverty. About 2 in 10 live below the 200% of the poverty line that most people, most experts would say the level in which somebody can support themselves without being in trouble, without worrying where food is coming from, without worrying about whether they have a roof over their head. So in 10 years without making progress, we decided, there's only 1 year till the year 2020, we decided to introduce a bold package of changes that we hope will move forward. If they do, it would take a big whack out of poverty, bring a lot of people up to not just the poverty line, but the 200% of the poverty line. We have 4 bills, separate bills we'll have individual authors speak to, but they would, as a package, make a big deal. A phase-in up to over 5 years, 4 years, phase-in up to $16 an hour minimum wage, a doubling of Minnesota's Working Family Tax Credit, eliminating the waiting list and enhancing the sliding fee child care assistance program so workers get enough money to live on and so kids get quality child care. And finally, a $300 a month increase in the Minnesota Family Investment Program. These all cost money. We are providing in here the omnibus bill that Carlos and I are carrying as one that would pay for them. We would call closing a loophole in a federal Social Security tax. It's not exactly that, but the federal government taxes Social Security on all of our wages up to $133,000. Above that, they don't collect anything. We figure if it's a flat tax, the least we could do is collect it from everyone, so we would gather that money as a state tax on those over $133,000. That would be more than sufficient to cover these proposals. We think this is about time. Minnesotans are not in doubt about whether we should take care of each other. A national poll, the only one I've ever seen on this subject, asked if people agreed with the statement, as a country, we should make sure people who work full-time are able to earn enough to keep their families out of poverty. It wasn't exactly close. 94% of the public agreed with that. Only 2 or 3% thought that was not a fair statement. We think that this package would help people who are working and struggling to make ends meet, help them make ends meet and move out of poverty, and people who are on welfare would help them with the first increase in 30 years. So with that, I'll turn it over to the other co-chair of the commission, Representative Carlos Mariani.
Thank you, Senator Marty. My name is Carlos Mariani, State Representative from St. Paul. One of the greatest privileges and frankly one of the most humbling experiences I've had in my couple decades here as a state legislator was co-chairing this commission. It was a privilege, and it was also incredibly eye-opening. We traveled the entire state. We made it a point not just to have that conversation here in the hallways of the Capitol, but to have it out in the very community, in communities all across the state. I don't think there was a corner of the state, Senator Marty, that we didn't visit. And what we found were some regional distinctions but also incredible commonness in terms of the challenges that the people of Minnesota faced then and continue to face now, as well as a commonness in terms of a spirit of responding to that. Poverty takes on many different forms. If you're in a northern part of the state, with great distances and small towns and virtually no public transit, it takes on a different form than if you're in the north side of Minneapolis with high density and the ability to move around greatly, but with severe racial isolation. I still have powerful memories of being in places like Grand Rapids, where we spent a good 2 days with a huge community setting, literally hundreds of people. They came and spent an entire evening with the commissioners and local legislators having an incredibly heart-to-heart talk about how poverty limits their communities, how it hurts people in their communities, and what their expectations were of state government. And clearly, they have an expectation of their state government, even as Minnesotans have an expectation of themselves to be able to do immediate things through their faith communities, through their local civic associations, et cetera. We had a similar hearing in Rochester. Again, with hundreds of people gathered for hours and hours in the evening, having that very same conversation. Here's what it looks like. Here's what we're doing individually. Here's what we're doing locally. And we need the state to be a part of walking with us in terms of solutions. So there's a vibrancy that was there. The vibrancy continues to be there. And there's a definite need for us to have this singular focused effort, I'm convinced, of eliminating poverty in our midst. We have taken some steps since then, but they're only steps. I mean, we clearly raised the minimum wage once since then. That wage is still not at the level that we're stepping it up to, and even the upper limit of that is far lower than what we know now is necessary to have a living wage. So 10, 11 bucks isn't going to do it. 12 bucks isn't going to do it. If you're not at 15 or 16 bucks, you're not at living wage standards. We did some work around savings accounts. Too little. Some of it now gone. There was strong bipartisan support for that particular effort. And we took advantage of the ACA. Now, we didn't see the ACA coming back then. But it has come, and our state did step up to have a very proactive Minnesota exchange that got at some of the issues that we heard of in terms of the impact of lack of health care on poverty. Our effort, quite frankly, was severely hampered because just as we were finishing the report, Senator, as you recall, we were entering into a massive economic meltdown. And it seems like, well, what a great time, to then address poverty. Absolutely. But quite frankly, at that time, we were just trying to figure out how to keep core level services of the state government as the economic impact was so profound on our entire society. So, the work that was called for then is still needed now. I believe the expectation of the people back then is still the expectations of Minnesota, and that's why we've come forward to offer these series of proposals that are very similar to what we saw a decade ago, and very much still needed because we've done very little in that regard. And so with that, I'm going to turn to my colleagues to talk about specific elements of the big proposal.
Representative Carlos.
Thank you, Senator Marty and Representative Mariani, for your leadership on this work. I'm honored to be chief authoring the minimum wage increase bill. In 2018, we passed a minimum wage ordinance in St. Paul. Though the leadership of our local leaders is greatly appreciated, it is time for lawmakers to take this work to the state level. All Minnesotans deserve to make a living wage. Yes, increasing the minimum wage to $16 in this phase-in approach, it's going to take us a while to get to 16, and that's not actually going to be a living wage in the years to come, but that it is a start. Really, what I'd just like to emphasize is that I came to this country in the 70s. I remember what it's like to have two parents working two jobs, not being able to make ends meet. I remember seeing my father maybe an hour a day because he worked all day, slept for a couple hours, and then went to work at night, and our family couldn't make ends meet. Families today, had the minimum wage been increasing with inflation and kept up with that, the minimum wage would be much closer to $19 an hour now, and yet at 16, we're still behind that. So I'm looking forward to bringing Minnesotans up to a place where we can start having wages that look more like a living wage, and to be able to lift all Minnesotans up, not just city by city, but through the entire state. So thank you so much for being here today. Next, I'd like to welcome up Representative Wosloway.
Thank you, Representative Herr. Tax credits for working Minnesotans living in poverty have been an extremely popular and extremely effective tool at reducing poverty. House File 1465 proposes more than doubling the working family credit by setting it at 75% of the earned income tax credit on the federal level. This would provide a boost of $1,000 to $3,000 per year for many low-income families in Minnesota. This bill really invests in those who most need our help, and it reflects our Minnesota values that everyone deserves the opportunity to be safe, healthy, and successful, and that we don't leave anyone behind. Thank you. Next up is Representative Richardson, who will be talking about her child care assistance bill.
Thank you. So early childhood is one of the most important times in the development of our children. Yet, for far too many families, access to affordable and high-quality child care remains out of reach. In Minnesota, the cost of child care is among the highest in the nation. If you have 2 children in child care, the cost can easily exceed $20,000 a year. The child care crisis we are experiencing is one of the major obstacles to financial security for families. If we want our children to reach their full potential, we need to invest in early childhood. Child care assistance helps families with low incomes remain in the workforce, and when parents do better economically, so do their children. I know firsthand the barriers families can face and the role that child care assistance can play in increasing economic opportunity. This bill will help parents gain access to high-quality child care options, giving children the great start in life they deserve. I'd like to next introduce Senator Lane.
Here we go. Hi, I'm Senator Carolyn Lane, and the Minnesota Family Investment Program provides work support and temporary cash assistance for children and their parents. And I need to say that 7 out of 8 people involved with MMFIB are children. This is our safety net to help families with children who have fallen into difficulty meet their basic needs, and then gives parents the opportunity to get on their feet with education and employment. This cash grant has not increased since 1986. I did some research, and I think I can say that back then average rent was about $375 a month. Average house price was around $40,000. Average income was around $22,000, and a ribeye steak cost $3.89 a pound. At 1986 rates, this program puts families today into deep poverty in the name of assistance. This session, I introduced Senate File 167 to increase the cash assistance by inflation in today's comparable. This bill just sends a message of the need. Governor Walz has produced $100 a month. This bill that we're talking about, this combined bill, produces about $300 a month, and for comparable to CPI, for a family of 2, it would need $568 a month. For a family of 3, you need $786 a month. So you can see what we're proposing is actually very modest compared to what it was in 1986 to help our families in this safety net. And I would like to pass it on now to the Children's Defense Fund with Barty Wahi.
Thank you. My name is Barty Wahi, and I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Defense Fund. We work to ensure all children, particularly children living in low-income households, children of color, and American Indian children, have what they need to thrive and to have the best possible start. CDF Minnesota was deeply involved in the commission, and frankly, because we've long advocated for the elimination of the injustice of child poverty here in the state of Minnesota. Over the past 10 years, our legislative agenda has been informed by the findings of that legislative commission, really with a focus on child care assistance, paid family leave, minimum wage increases, and family tax credits that really help build the economic stability of families. As encouraged as we have been by the progress that has been made, we are still deeply disappointed that we haven't been able to really reduce and eliminate child poverty. Here in the state of Minnesota, 13% of children live at the poverty line. When we disaggregate that data, 36% of American Indian children and 38% of African American children live in poverty. This isn't just a story of economic injustice, but also racial and ethnic injustice as well. We appreciate the champions who have been working doggedly on these policies and programs over the last 10 years, many of them the champions that are standing right behind me, as well as new ones. And also want to really call out other champions, Representative Pinto and his House File 1, the governor, as I was just saying, as well as the governor in terms of their commitment to helping support children. But we really can and must do better. Every day, children get older, and the effects and the impact of poverty hurt them deeply, hurt them in ways that they carry with them for the rest of their lives. In a state with as much generosity and abundance, we would also ask that we could be a state focused on justice. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Doug Mitchell.
Good afternoon. I'm Doug Mitchell with the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition. As you've heard, 10 years ago, we formed a commission to end poverty in Minnesota. The voices of people of faith helped create that study. And this year, the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition has issued a comprehensive report that documents where progress has been made and where it is not. The progress has been very small in individual actions, and they have fallen under both Democratic and Republican administrations and legislatures because ending poverty is not a partisan issue. But there's much work yet to do. Our faith communities across the state see people struggling. We are the doors that they come to when they need assistance. Children and seniors going hungry, homeless individuals and families. Minnesotans are unable to afford what we would assume would simply be basic necessities of life. It is time to then making, as they've said before, that someone working full-time should be living above the poverty line and have some sense of a decent life. Our dear ones deserve better than they are getting right now. We support all efforts to address poverty in our state, and we welcome a broad discussion of the issues leading to poverty and opportunities for economic stability for all Minnesotans. The writer of Proverbs tells us, "Those who oppress the poor insult their maker. Those who are kind to the needy honor God." I invite us to stand with honor and not dishonor. Thank you.
Reverend Grant Stevenson from Isaiah.
Hi, my name is Grant Stevenson. I'm a pastor and leader in the Isaiah organization. I think that it goes without saying, but I will say that every major faith tradition on earth puts the poor at the center as a pillar of its concern. And that's why so many faith leaders gathered 10 years ago, every bishop that I'm aware of, and faith leaders from denominations and other faith traditions gathered 10 years ago to sign a declaration that in 10 years we should end poverty in Minnesota. Why? Because we can and because we must. As Senator Marty pointed out, we have hardly made progress. You can point to areas where good things have happened, but the rate of poverty in this state is about the same as it was 10 years ago. Now, in the Christian tradition, a week from Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, which is the beginning of the Lenten season. If you're not from that tradition, you may not know that that's a season of repentance. I actually can't think of a better word for what is happening now in this press conference and with this package of bills than repentance. That is about turning into a new direction, and that's what the people who are presenting bills here today are offering to us as the state of Minnesota, and I propose that we get behind them and that we support them, because this is exactly what we need to do for our own sake and for the sake of those who need it the most. It is not good enough, as we were 10 years ago, to be aspirational. We have to put actual bills in front of the people who can vote for them and make measurable change for the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. So we just wanted to not let the 10th anniversary of the commission pass by without remembering it and moving it from beyond the aspirations, as Reverend Stevenson mentioned. That's something we're going to actually move forward on. I want to say there's a lot of hope. I think a lot of the authors here are new first-term members. I also would say it's not just the 4 bills or so in this package, but it's also like House File 1 and Representative Koitza-Watun and Senator Melissa Wickland. They has some home visiting program as well as child care sliding fee program, the paid family medical leave. There are lots of other good bills that are moving forward. As 1 or 2 of the speakers mentioned, Governor Wallace has put in a $100 a month increase in MFIP, the first governor to do so in 30-some years. He's proposed cutting in half the CCAP, the child care assistance program waiting list. He's proposed significant investments in affordable housing, and like Representative Hausman and others have been working on that here. We can make the change, and as Carlos mentioned, we heard lots of horrific stories about what's happening in our communities around the state, stories that we shouldn't be having happening here, and we can address this if we have the political will. We say now is the time. The commission committed, as a state commitment, to end poverty by the year 2020. We still have a year to go. This package will move us well forward. So, questions from anyone?
In the minimum wage thing, would it just be equal increments up to 16, or how do you propose to get
it? It was going up. It's right now for the large employers, it's $9.86 now. It would go up by just about $1.50 in August, then $1.50 a year later, then $1 for the following 3 years.
You said that still wouldn't kind of take it to where it needs to be.
Well, the minimum wage would not by itself bring people all out of poverty, but the Earned Income Tax Credit bill, Representative Wallace is a typical parent with a child making about, a couple of kids making about $20,000 a year would boost their income by close to $3,000. So the package of things, the affordable child care, the other things together would help make people make ends meet, and we think would do the biggest single whack at taking people out of poverty in Minnesota history.
Senator, someone might come away from this encouraged, someone else might come away from this more cynical, that you had a 10-year lead into this. You've done very little in those 10 years. Both Republicans and Democrats had the opportunities to do so. How do you turn this away from being a cynical exercise as opposed to something perhaps more?
Sure. Okay, well, first of all, I think a lot of us have been introducing bills like this, pushing bills like this year after year. There's been a lot less willingness to pay attention. I think there's been a change in the political dynamics here at the Capitol in the last year or so. Yeah, I've had bills on minimum wage and these things for many years. I think all of us here have been working on it for a long time. Now we have Representative Pinto chairing an early childhood committee that's making serious steps forward on this. I think we have a real chance to move forward. Yeah, you and I know at the end of the session we might say, well, we haven't made any more progress. That's one possibility. There's the possibility we're going to move forward, we're going to start passing some of these, and that's what we're aiming for, and that's what we're calling for.
I think it's about new political leadership, and at the expense of calling out kind of older guys like me, the point is that oftentimes you have to have the critical mass of leaders, to have the critical mass of votes, the critical mass of being able to engage the public. And I think we're much closer to that critical mass today. I'm really excited about the new leadership that's come into the House in particular, and obviously with this new administration. I think the understandings and the commitments are deeper in many ways, perhaps not deeper, but better informed than they were 10 years ago.
Were any of the benchmarks in that report met, or have they all been kind of below par?
We didn't have a lot of benchmarks in the report. We spelled out the direction. again, a bipartisan commission saying, here's the direction we want to move, here's what we should be doing for early childhood, here's what we need to be doing for wages, here's what we have to do for housing. We didn't spell out benchmarks, we pointed out direction. Bipartisan commission, it was kind of you map the route you want to take, whether we're going to follow that map or not. At least we wanted to make sure we could accomplish something that would say, here's how you can end poverty, instead of something smaller than that. We do have, I know at least one of my Republican Senate colleagues has got a bill that would increase, over 4 years, would increase the MFIP benefits by $200 a month. That's a Republican doing it. The difficulty is here, we're proposing, because these programs do cost money, to help tilt the thing. Even though the minimum wage is largely private sector funded, people who work in nursing homes, their wages are roughly set by the state. So it'll cost the state more. And this bill actually proposes how we pay for it. And when we talk about that, there's less bipartisan support for paying for things.
In either body, is there enough votes to get over the essentially tax increase if you're paying for this by closing that loophole on Social Security?
Well, we'll see. I mean, clearly the governor's got some proposals coming forward for revenue increases that involve tax changes. We're beginning to have that conversation. I think that there is a more confident posture in the House relative to this issue. We're not in a time of great economic peril as we were in 2009 when we came forward with our initial report that begged the question about, so what tax, are you going to, reconfigure in order to pay for these good investments in people? At that time, we were just trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. So we're in a different environment, which I think provides us some comfort in terms of making tax adjustments to meet the people's needs. Clearly, we're seeing some of that in the governor's proposal, so that also provides, some comfort in terms of context for that. I can't speak for the Senate. And
we'll wait and see.
I just wanted to say that you got to start with a vision. You have to have a vision, you have to have the package together, you have to have something you're going on rather than just an amorphous, we need to do something. And I do want to highlight what Senator Marty said, that there is Senator Ralph, a Republican in the Senate, who has that bill to increase MFIB by $50 a month, for $50 a year per month over 4 years, so it's $200 total. And that's remarkable. We have, at that level, bipartisan. We'll see how we can push that.
Do you have a sense of how much money this raises?
That tax, if we were to extend the Social Security tax up for income over that, it would be about $1 billion, which is more than enough over a year, I believe. Or maybe, I apologize, I will check and get back to you on that.
I just wanted to say that there are copies of the JRLC study on the progress report that will be available and be handed out after the conference is over.
Thank you very much.
Very well, thank you.
I just saw that. Chairman Mariani.